Tracy Bowling.
Here.
Candace Bryant.
Here.
Lori Cahill.
Here.
Tiffany Clark.
Here.
Jessica Ford.
Here.
Dan Johnson Crowe. Kevin Madigan.
Here.
Dustin McCoy.
Here.
Rebecca McGuire Dye.
Here.
Kurt Merrifield.
Here.
TJ Metcalf.
Here.
Amy Owens.
Here.
Nicole Kingston.
Here.
Mandy Coulier.
Here.
Josh Simpson.
Here.
Eric Shelby present. Haley Victory.
Here.
Okay. Did everybody get a copy of the minutes? Get a chance to review the minutes from last week? Is there any, seen any discrepancies or anything? I didn't see anything myself.
I'll move them.
I'm sorry.
I'll move them.
Have a motion to approve the minutes by Dustin.
I second.
Second by Kevin. Opposed? The motion will carry. Okay, now, we're going to review local demographic data. And we are going to have Ms. Dan Johnson come up to please give us a summary that provides an overview of local population trends and potential impact on future Nelson County population and distribution.
So I apologize, I didn't get the slides to Wes early enough, and
Just put them.
you just put them up? Okay. So, but you do have a packet, more information on demographics in Nelson County that you'll ever want to have. But I can go along when he gets that up. But those of you who don't know me, I'm the Planning and Zoning Director here in Nelson County for all of the jurisdictions. So for the 4 cities and the county. I've been here for 18 years. This is about my 8th local planning committee that I've sat on between the 2 school districts. So I kind of tease Wes that part of my salary is pain and suffering for having to sit through 8 of these over the years. But and I know Stephen pretty well after all of these. So we do demographics every time we have a local planning committee, whether it is the city or the county, and we go through the same information every year, and it's probably just as dry this year as it was the last time. But the Planning Commission, this is actually kind of a timely meeting to be on this committee and for our county, because the Planning Commission is currently undergoing a review of the county's comprehensive plan. And the comprehensive plan is our master plan for the county on how the county is to develop. So in addition to bringing this data to you, we're also looking at this data to determine how the county should grow, where the county should grow, and what constraints and issues that we have. And I was talking to Jim Brooks earlier. We've had forum groups, steering committees, public meetings, and it's been very interesting to hear the issues and concerns from individuals about where we're going to go in the future. But Nelson County has seen a substantial amount of growth since 1970. Most of that growth has occurred between 1970 and 2020. We have doubled our population in Nelson County. I serve as the census chairman for the 2020 census for the county, which we just went through that, and most of you hopefully filled out your census form. Between 1990 and 2010, in that 20-year period, our population increased 42%. It's a substantial amount of growth, and now we are at all of us, whether it's schools, the utility companies, we're all having to react to that growth. And that's what we're trying to look at in our comprehensive plan. The current 2020 population for the county as a whole, now the 2020 census has come out. that is only Census Tract data. It's at the tract level and the county data. They have not released any city data at this point. So what's that?
What are you looking at?
We're not looking at one yet, so I'm just talking. So, at some point, hopefully by March, they will release the city level data, and we'll get down to the smaller block level data. But right now, it's on a larger scale. So we're at 46,738 persons in Nelson County. The first page is dealing with our dwelling units by geographic area. The Planning Commission issues permits, zoning compliance permits for any structure that you put on the property. So we keep track every year, and we have to report to the census every year how many dwelling units are being constructed in the county. Obviously, since the recession, we have reduced that number. That number has decreased significantly since the recession. When I started in 2003, we were doing anywhere from 400 to 500 houses, dwelling units a year. We're now, as of today, we've issued permits for 279 dwelling units. That's high compared to what we've had over the last couple of years since the recession. We've been running about 200 houses a year. So we've kind of moderated on our housing market, but you can look through all of the information that we provided. The second map is our geographic map that we use to kind of identify where the growth is occurring, and that kind of coincides with the tables that's on the first page. So going area by area, obviously the one is the urban area. The Planning Commission looks at Bardstown not as its city limits that they currently have, but the area that they can expand into using gravity sewer. So that's a pretty significant area outside of the actual corporate limits of the city. But we encourage, the planners want to encourage growth, obviously, in that urban area. So between 2010 and 2020, 31% of our housing growth has occurred within that number one, that Bardstown urban core. Which is a little lower than what we would like. We'd actually like to see 45% of that growth to occur in the Bardstown area. And the reason for that is that you have the infrastructure there to accommodate that type growth with the roads, utility, and the sewer and the water. But we're running at 31%. The previous 6 years was 31% as well. So it's pretty steady on where growth is occurring. That urban core is quickly becoming built out, which is an issue for us in this comprehensive plan as to where the growth is going to now occur. We're seeing a lot of infill development, but those parcels of land within that urban core are pretty few and far between. And that's why we're starting to see some development go out in different areas. So go into the Boston area, which we're here tonight. 2010, 2020, we saw 5% of the dwelling units go in this location. One of the reasons that is low is this is a naturally sensitive area per our comprehensive plan due to we have wetlands, floodplains, and our knob regions. So those are obviously areas that we don't want to encourage growth in, and 5% is actually a little higher than what we would encourage, but we've seen that over the last 10 years. Number 3 is the 245 corridor, which is a natural growth corridor given the roadway and the hospital. That area, we've seen 18.7% of the dwelling units. One of the big developments is Corman's Crossing, which by the time it's developed out will have over 500 houses. And I'll go over how many houses we've got left in that subdivision. But number 3, the Kentucky 245 corridor, it will continue to be a growth area as it has been, as long as we can handle sewer. Sewer is a big issue right now in our county. So that line that runs, there's a sewer line that runs out 245 to Corman's Crossing in the hospital. There are some concerns about that from the city, so there'll need to be some improvements there in that corridor, but I'm sure that will be probably on the books, the planning books for that to be improved so that we can continue to see that as a growth corridor. 31E North, Cox's Creek, that is one of our areas that we would like to see additional growth in that area, but it's just not occurred yet. They're running at about 7% dwelling units in that area. One of the reasons is sewer stops at Delaney. So at Plum Run, Old Nazareth Road, that's the end of the sewer line. So until we can get infrastructure built out to Cox's Creek, we're still not going to see growth in that area without that adequate infrastructure. And then 5, Bloomfield, Chaplin, Fairfield area, 7.8, or I'm sorry, going down, it's 13.8%. There's been a reduction since the previous 6 years, and that's just, we've had Blazer Heights in the city of Bloomfield, that was 2003 to 2009, and then Copperfields, and then there were some issues with that Copperfields development, the change of developers, but we're starting to see that development start up again. So we'll see this area, the Bloomfield, Chaplin, Fairfield area, that will continue to be one of our growth areas. Again, infrastructure is a problem. If we want higher density development, then we need the infrastructure in those areas. 6 is the Woodlawn, Botland area. We've seen a considerable amount of growth on 605, Poplar Flat, Woodlawn Road area. One of the reasons that was started, and for those of you who all remember, American Greetings went out there. Along with American Greetings went a sewer line, and you opened up that area with some development along Woodlawn Road, and then it came around to Poplar Flat. That area continues to be a hot spot for development. The 150 project will open up additional land. It will go behind 150 Quick Stop is what we're hearing. They haven't actually announced the final layout, but that's what we're hearing. And so if that road goes behind 150 Quick Stop, there is a significant amount of land there that can be opened up for development in the Woodlawn Botland area. 7 is New Haven Road, or the 31 East South Corridor, New Haven, Howardstown, Melody Lake, Nelsonville. That area, again, it's been one of our growth areas. We had a development on 31E just south of St. Thomas that was constructed that added quite a few dwelling units. We haven't seen that many. Again, we've got naturally sensitive areas with your floodplain and knobs, especially along the Balltown Road, Icetown Road area. But we have seen 11.52% increase, or 11.52% of our dwelling units in the New Haven, southern Nelson County area. So we're continuing. Like I said, we've got almost 290 house permits have been pulled, dwelling unit permits have been pulled this year. We're seeing kind of a change in where they're going from previous years. Obviously, Nelson County is graying with our baby boomers getting older. We're seeing them sell their farms and move to smaller areas. We're having a lot more townhouses being developed. We do out on Philiatry Lane. If you've been out on Philiatry Lane, there is a lot of duplexes and mixed family type developments being constructed out there. So the issue will be infrastructure, and that's going to be our main issue in the county, is where we go from here with infrastructure. As of today, we have plats in the office that have been filed for 425 new lots. If we're building at 300, if we're wanting to stay at the 300 level every year, we only have enough supply now. If all these get approved and get platted, we only have enough supply for a year. So there's a lot of uncertainty for us as to where growth is going to occur, how it's going to occur, and how quick we're going to be able to get these lots platted. I haven't had a major subdivision come in for quite a while. We're finishing out phases. So like Blazer Heights in Bloomfield, there's a new phase in Blazer Heights, which was 30 lots. Copperfields has another 100 lots. Corman's Crossing, there's another 123 lots. So total, we added up 425 lots, which will give us a supply for about a year's worth of housing if we're trying to stay on that 275-300 range. So that's dwelling units. It's a pretty good indication of our population increase, obviously. We're running at about 2.3 persons per household per the census. So if you add those increase in dwelling units by 2.3, that'll obviously give you your population increase. So we're growing. We will not, the 2010 to 2020 population increase was only 7%. The previous 10 years was 15%. The forecast for us from the Kentucky State Data Center is to be about 8%. It's more moderate growth, which for me, that's a blessing because we need to catch up a little bit on infrastructure. The next page is census data. And again, this is coming from Census, so you can get all of this information online. The first table is 1970 through 2040, 1970 through 2020 census, and then the 2030 and 2040 projections. So hopefully by 2030, we'll finally top the 50,000 population. But again, we're looking at about a 7 to 8% growth rate with population. The next one is the Census Tract. So that's your next, the fourth page is your Census Tract map. Based on how the census divides it up. They are somewhat close, not exactly, but it's similar in areas on our dwellings. So going around the county again, starting in Bloomfield, Census Tract 9301, in between 2010 and 2020, there was a 2.64% increase in population. Under 18 is the growth rate for individuals under the age of 18. Unfortunately, there was an 8.4% decrease in children under the age of 18 in that area. And again, that's partially because there's no developments being developed in that area for housing. So you'll see some growth in that from Blazer Heights with those 30 lots, but until we start seeing some more developments in that area, the decrease in children will probably continue in that area. Going around to 9302, which is your Louisville Road corridor, east of 31E North, we saw an 8% increase in population and only a 1.92% increase in children under 18. And then 9302 is west of 31E, and that's 18.87%. That obviously is taking in Corman's Crossing. You've got some other Saddlebrook and other ones that are out, Blankenrod, those areas. So that's taken in those that population increase out on 245, and then a 6.3.2%. We will continue to see that area as one of our growth areas. Going over to Boston, only a less than 1% increase in population. A minus 4.6% increase in, or it was a decrease in children under age 18. New Haven was I was pretty shocked by this, that there was a minus 4% increase or decrease in total population, and then almost a 21% decrease in children under the age of 18. And then the Woodlawn area, you had a 8.6% population increase, but a decrease, 3.8% decrease. So some of this is attributed to the dwelling units and the lack of development within these areas. The other things that we can contribute it to is it's nationwide. If you go to the last page, which are population pyramids, if you start at the top in 2020, you'll see bulges in the population pyramid. The top bulge are the baby boomers, which were born between 1946 and 1965. That bulge are the baby boomers. The next one that you see, there's another little smaller bulge in the pyramid, and those are the echo boomers. Those are the children of the baby boomers. And so if you see the bulge at the top, you've got a huge increase in our age group there, and then their children are the next level, and then we go down. If you go down to the 2040 pyramid, you can see that we're starting to moderate there, and we're starting to become somewhat stationary. And so what this is indicating is that we have a high quality of life here, but our youth are not staying here, and we're not having younger families stay here. And so we're starting to see that decrease, and if you can see down there at the bottom, the children from 0 to 4 are now by 2040 are under the age or under 30%. So that, the thing that came up with a lot of our forums is, how do we retain youth in Nelson County? How do we keep them here so that we're not we're growing, but it's just at a moderate growth rate. But we're, at some point we're going to see it become inverted if we don't start keeping younger families here, building developments to encourage people here, having amenities here to keep the youth here. So that's hopefully we can change that over the next 20 years. But that's typical in growth communities where we're near metro communities. I think one thing that's coming out of COVID are people wanting to move away from metro areas, and Nelson County is really attractive. In probably the last 2 weeks, I've had at least 5 calls from people out of California wanting to move to Nelson County. So every call I get, and realtors are calling, saying people wanting to move here. So the issue is we've got the demand, we just don't have the supply to keep up with it. And again, infrastructure to handle that. So where do we go from here in forecasting? 8% moderate growth. One of the things that we talked about today in a group, we have a great opportunity here because of the Ford announcement in Glendale, but we're not quite shovel ready on a lot of things, so we're going to have to be really proactive in the next few years. We could see, New Haven is 30 minutes from Glendale. 31, jumping over to Hodgenville and going to Glendale. There's some opportunities for that end of the county maybe to benefit from development or from people moving to New Haven and driving to Glendale for the Ford plant. Obviously, we're going to try to go after ancillary or accessory factories that are associated with them. Where do you put those and how do we handle that? So we've got great opportunity, but obviously we've got some development constraints that we have to deal with. And that's going to be a big key for the Planning Commission and Eric for the fiscal court over the next 20 years is how do we handle that? So the other issues we have with development constraints in certain parts of the county, we have a lot of big landowners that are not ready to sell yet. So the developments we're seeing now, if you're seeing them throughout the county, you're seeing 10 or 20 lots at a time. And it's because the larger chunks, the larger land tracts are owned by a few individuals and they're just not ready to sell yet. So the days of seeing major subdivisions come in like a Maywood or a Woodlawn, those are probably gone for a while until we start seeing that ownership change in those large tracts of land. So, and obviously the cost of land, cost of construction, right now that's hindering a lot of people from getting in the development business. So that's where we are. We'll kind of see, and we'll, our information will be, it's going to be out there. We'll have public meetings, because we'll come out with a future land use map that will kind of show where and how we're going to direct growth and how it's going to be divvied out in the county, and we'll have that done hopefully by next July. So, entertain any questions.
I have 2 questions. The first one, you said regarding the Bloomfield Road corridor that it will continue to be one of our growth areas. Just confirming that corridor is continuing to grow.
Well, it's going to be moderate until there's a force main that runs from Bloomfield back to Bardstown for the sewer. Unfortunately, that's not designed to handle growth. That's always been a growth corridor. The question that we're looking, are there areas, there's been discussion of a sewer line from Bloomfield to Chaplin. There's been discussion about running a sewer line from Bloomfield to Fairfield. So that's on the table right now of what can we do to encourage growth in Bloomfield and New Haven. What can we do to encourage growth in those areas? Because obviously we want our towns to survive. And that's what we've got to come up with is how do we do that? So.
All right, and the second question, you said the projection by 2040, are you just not staying here? So
you can see in the numbers on the pyramids, you've got that college age, obviously they leave for college, and then they come back and, if they've got, I had a lady that was at one of our forum groups who said, I went off to college, I got a master's degree, but I couldn't come back here because I couldn't find a job. And she did because she had family here, but she said, I ended up having to clean houses. And she couldn't use her degree. Now she's finally gotten a job in that field and was able to stay here. Not everybody's that lucky. So diversification of our employment, being able to draw people back. You know, we're heavily, you know, bourbon industry, manufacturing, auto manufacturing. But how do we bring people back to Nelson County and have them stay here, have their families here? And so that's a big need that we have. And so I don't know what the answer is going to be.
So just to throw it out there, using like your 30-year eye as your vision, do you think combining middle schools would allow students to stay?
That's not what I'm not going to give an opinion on that. Yeah, I do land use. That's not my thing. Not stepping in that one, sorry.
Good questions. Does anybody else have any questions for Jan?
How soon you gonna get sewer at Cox's Creek School so I can get rid of wastewater?
Well, we have, the last thing we want to do in Nelson County are have package treatment plants.
Yeah.
In every location of our county. But, you know, that's what we're looking at if we can't get sewer lines running. We are really attractive to people, and I'm just getting calls everywhere from people wanting to do campgrounds, to short-term rentals, to other type of event facilities, and, you know, we run into issues pretty much on every type of infrastructure issue. So, yeah, Cox's Creek would be a natural area to have a sewer line. I think before I came, around the time that I came in 2003, they had completed a 201 facilities plan to run sewer to Cox's Creek, but I'm not sure exactly. Obviously, funding is going to be a big issue.
Do you happen to know the population growth since Thomas Nelson was built by chance? What year that was? Does anybody have a clue? What year was Thomas Nelson built?
2010.
2010? Just curious how much was grown since 2010.
You know, the key to our growth has been a lot of location. A lot of our growth has occurred people moving into Nelson County. I can tell you when the recession hit and gas almost hit $4 a gallon, that day of commuting was kind of, you know, people thought, wait a second, you know, this could happen again, and we're starting to see that creep back up. So once the recession hit, that's when I think our commuter days, I think we can get it back, because now that we've had COVID, people are trying to get out of the metro areas and wanting to come back in. But I think they still have that memory of $4 a gallon of gas and having to commute. You know, Paducah is doing a really interesting thing. They are offering incentives for people who are doing remote work now to move. They're giving them incentives. So I sent it out to all of our elected officials, and I'm like, look at this. You know, Paducah's giving incentives for people to come back home. And if you're remote working, come home, we'll take you back, we'll put you in a home here. And so they're giving like a $2,000 incentive plus some breaks on cable and things like that. So we're just gonna have to get real innovative to get people to come back in.
That's great, thank you for that, Dan. Very detailed, just a very good presentation. If there's no other questions, we'll move on to the equity and opportunity matrix and program data. Superintendent Russ Radley, Director of Workforce Laura Arnold, Director of Student Performance Alex Martin. Provides overview of core middle school models and program data as it relates to purpose of local planning committee process.
So really first we want to provide some space. Last meeting, you guys asked for additional data, and Alex worked on a packet for that. And we're just going to provide some space for everyone to kind of look at the data. There's a lot of information in there. We recognize that it can take some explanation to make sense of it, and then it allows us to look at that data further. It would be the other link.
It's not the same as your packet.
Well, it's at the bottom.
Oh, it's at the bottom.
Good afternoon. So, last week, Ms. Arnold and I came before you guys to talk about these things here on the right in front of your pamphlet. And really some belief statements in terms of ensuring students we are empowering their lives and excavate their gifts. We believe that students need access and opportunities to the following experiences. And those things will help us continue to, and through uniting people, place, and purpose, we're able to accomplish our goals. But the four themes at the bottom, I think that's really important, that our focus is increasing access and opportunities for those things. Diverse academic course offerings, career exploration, student organizations and athletics, and then visual and performing arts. So, the packet I put together is really kind of a synopsis of some of the questions that you guys had, and connecting back to this and how are we going to offer these increased access and opportunities and what are the implications of that. So I want to start with this. When you open your pamphlet, the first page on the left, one of the questions is really thinking about like what other school districts have a potential model like this. And I want to reference some of the community conversations that happened several months ago. We did reach out to a lot of those school districts, and you see those representatives at the top. The videos from those conversations are within the slide deck here. You guys can click on those and rewatch those videos if you like. But those representatives obviously spoke about their model and what they're learning from that. And there are a number of 612 or 712 models throughout the district. In addition to that, it's not just the 612 model, it's really about having your resources in one location. So we also looked out and reached out to middle schools that had their campus on the same campus as their high school, right? And that way students, obviously it's easy access for students to be able to utilize those resources and utilize the personnel at both facilities. And so the 5 bubbles that you see there, we established contact with those school districts and really asked them those questions in terms of what does that access and opportunities look like. Those are some of the things that really stood out in the conversation. Russell County Middle and their high school and their ATC are all in the same location. They have around 17% of their 8th graders have an exploratory opportunity at ATC where they participate in a year-long study. Basically, they're like 9-week segments where they can visit this pathway for about 9 weeks and engage in that work and then transition to another. I thought that one was pretty interesting. Also, some thematic themes you'll see is a lot of sharing of program builders. When you think about band, the high school leader partnered together with the middle school to have this all-encompassing 6 through 12 program. And it talks a lot about co-teaching. Also, it references a lot of access. If a student would like to pursue, obviously we have that opportunity. They can easily do so by leveraging the high school resources. So those are some of the conversations that we had. Another question that was brought up on your pamphlet on the right is what is our current academic data? So this is a snapshot of our middle school data over time. And so you can see each specific middle school over the last 4 years. 2020 we did not have K-Prep testing due to COVID. But you can see the scores of each of those content areas, and that is percent of students who score proficient or distinguished on K-Prep testing in middle school. And then you can see that in relation to the state average, and whether or not they're above or below for that given subject area. And then finally, I think it's important to really look long term. What is, 3 years, that's a rather short period of time. So what does our middle school data look like for a period of time? So we go all the way back to 2012. The graph in the bottom right corner shows our performance in relation to state average. And you can see pretty much we've been rather consistent over that time, around 3 to 4 to 5% percentage points below state average. And then finally, if you rotate to the back of the pamphlet, there are a few other low-hanging fruit pieces that you guys have referenced in terms of data implications. So one question was brought up, was think about this again, access and opportunities to high school coursework, high school credits. We talked about Algebra 1. You can see our enrollments in each of our 4 middle schools, and then how many students are currently taking Algebra 1 in those spaces. Again, Oklahoma is the only school that currently offers that this year. Now, previously, we have offered that in our middle schools, and you can see the enrollment data there. But one point I want to mention, if you think about the enrollment at Boston in 2021, we had 8 students there. So I think what we're finding difficulties in terms of staffing allocations is that finds it difficult to allocate a staff member for simply 8 students. And then you look at the Cape Red data, and essentially that shows about how many students would qualify for Algebra 1 for this year based upon their Cape Red scores. Again, 8 students at New Haven, 18 at Boston, 17 at Oklahoma, 26 at Bloomfield. Those are estimates. Then finally, we had a question around how many preps do teachers have? And this is an average, so on average, if you're at these middle schools, this is about how many number of preps that you have, which does correlate pretty well to enrollment sizes. And then finally, the last question were, well, what programs do we have at the high school? And really, these are listed out in pathway conversations. So we have the following electives or courseworks in those pathways at each high school and then also at the ATC. Each of these slides are linked within the agenda for today. You guys can reference those, and then also the videos from those conversations previously. Any questions?
I have one.
Yes.
On the programs, are any of the programs that are available in the high schools available in the middle school?
There are some overlap, yes. So I think traditionally a lot of middle schools do offer a performing arts. Agriculture in 2 places. Obviously, there's health and PE. Trying to think of some other opportunities in our middle schools.
Arts collab,
There are some arts collab opportunities that are available, yes. Those are the ones that come to mind.
Can I ask a question for someone who's not in the principal realm? When you say average number of teacher preps, does that mean the different types of classes they're teaching? Or what does that mean?
Yes, sorry. So that would be different courses that I teach throughout the day.
So I'm not just teaching geometry all day long, I'm teaching 3 or 4 different ones.
Correct, which requires more time and planning, more efforts, etc.
I just make sure I understood.
and that doesn't include any elective or any
Now
Care Connect or anything?
that data includes all electives and core contents with the exception of Caring Connects. Really, all schools are doing Caring Connects, so let's remove that data point. So I encourage you to take this and look at it a little deeper. Again, yeah, it's all about increasing access and opportunities for our students, so thank you.
Wait just a minute. Let me ask you real quick. So you got 5 bubbles here that shows, is that the 5 models that shows the combined schools? Is that what that is? At the beginning, back at the 612 partnership discussion?
Right, so the 5 bubbles, we had a question really asking about what are some other school districts doing outside of this space, and really think about like these 612 models potentially. This is a snapshot of, we reached out to these 5 school districts inquiring about their access and opportunities for students. And these are the things that they spoke about in terms of how do they have that partnership between their middle school and their high school.
So how many total do you think's in the state that does that?
It's hard to say, it's not something to quantify, but I'd say approximately 20 to 30 that have a 612 model. And then really, like I said, it's not just about the 612 model, it's also about, we reached out to those schools that had a middle school and a high school in the same campus.
Right.
So like Bardstown Middle, notice that they're there, obviously, their elementary, middle, and high are all in the same vicinity.
Right.
And I talked to the middle school counselor about what does that look like for students to transition to that space, is that opportunity, are those opportunities allowed? What does that partnership look like? And those are some of the things that she referenced.
So did you get any feedback about what kind of, because I did watch a little of that on the slide, like as far as what it, community-wide, what kind of impact did it have on the community as a whole? I mean, as far as these little hamlets and incorporated cities and stuff, was there any discussion about that?
Really, all of their questions were academic in nature.
Thank you.
Mr. Metcalf asked earlier today, and I just got this information to him, about middle school sizes. So one of the conversations we've had a little bit over the past few months has been about comparable districts and middle school sizes. And as you can see here, some of the middle schools in our region are as big as 1,000 students. I think what we've observed in some of those places is just because you have 1,000 students doesn't mean you have radically different opportunities for kids. It really varies by district and that district's focus. So you're going to see some programs, some districts have 400 or 500 students in them that are offering more programs for those middle schools, and even places that have 900 students. I do think if you look through here, so over the past, this is representative of comparable middle schools across our region. And if you just scroll down, you'll see the average is 670 students in the average middle school. And we're not saying that's an optimal number, we're just saying that's the average. And then if you take a look at Nelson County's current numbers at the bottom, again, just as a reference point, we're talking about just transparency and where we get the data from. This data is on the slide deck now as you look at that. It also allows you to look at middle schools. Some of those middle schools are united right next to their high school, and some of those are separate from the high school. But just good to see the average comparable middle school data. It's almost 3 times currently what we have in Nelson County. So that would be nearly 6 times as large as the New Haven Middle School. As you think about that and our realities of preparing for the future, is just good data to consider. Additionally, this one of the things I asked the LPC to look at, and go back to that slide briefly, was the equity and opportunity matrix. So I'm going to pass out really an updated version of the equity and opportunity matrix that goes into more data around 4 models that in theory have been on the table over the past 2 years. So this was passed out last week, and really the 4 options that have been in a conversation, I would say, for years, really, I'd say beyond my time in this role, is our current model, potentially uniting under 2 junior high schools, 2 high schools. This was the homework. This has evolved a little bit since then. The middle high school combined model, which we refer to as a community campus model, and the 1 middle school high school model, which really didn't exist probably until the last 6 months as this conversation came up. Probably because it didn't exist prior to this, because we didn't have an opportunity, we didn't have a building at the time that would potentially host that many middle school students. These are all conversations that have occurred. I think if you look at the left side, this is not scientific. This is just a general way of thinking about them, and the data we share will go into more depth about these 4 models. So from an equity standpoint, there's an important assumption that cohort size and community are important in the way we look at school. The optimal cohort size, 150 to 200, is what we've been targeting. And we've observed that 10 to 12 years ago as a part of the conversations that were occurring in transitioning from one high school to 2. A lot of it was around that. It was around access and opportunity for more students, but it was also, when places grow, beyond what people might see as I know everyone in this grade level, I know everyone in this school building, there are unique tensions that can be created. That was the original conversation. I wasn't a part of those. I just know that was a part of it. It was just an equity issue. Opportunity, again, I think opportunity probably increases in any model beyond the current model, but the 2 greatest opportunities really would be the 2 models on the right. And This is today's packet that aligns to that. And we have really just a few minutes for you to begin to kind of dive into this, and it will allow us to begin to talk about rationale and purpose for district facility plans. And these four models are starting points for conversation. Obviously, the current model exists as it is, and any impact on the facility plan would really just be renovations to current buildings. But on the front of this, it talks about aligning the purpose of the LPC to the district facility plan. And the words that kept coming up over the past 2 weeks were long-term solutions, efficiency, access, equity, student performance, long-term financial impact, demographics. Those are things that when we looked at the state's mandate, if you will, the state's regulation, those were the themes on that conversation, in addition to a few others like transportation and duplication of services, etc. So this document is not really appealing to the eye, but it breaks down the four models into 5 different categories. It looks at the four models through program opportunity, through equity and access, facility funding, long-term financial planning, and transportation. So I'm going to ask is if you can take a couple minutes and begin to look, notice that these program opportunity goes across comparatively, equity and access across comparatively. Let me just, as a disclaimer to these four models, you could, in theory, do any of these four models exceptionally well or poorly. It's all about the way that they're designed and created. But all the other variables at play are not in your control. So I'll just give you a couple minutes to take a look at it, take notes on it, and we'll see where we go from there. So when we designed this conversation, we labeled the structure as an all voices roundtable. And really what that means is we would pass the mic if you have anything to say about this initial conversation. This allows you time to do that. We know that there are shy souls and there are not shy souls, and we want to create a space for you to say anything that you might want to add to this conversation. We also know that because of the group size, we want to keep that within reason due to the timing of the public forum. We also, this conversation will continue. This is a starting point for further conversations, and/or we can choose to come back after the public forum and continue this discussion based on the LBC. But these 4 models are really the conversations that will start facility planning exams. So. And really, the comments should be anything that you may notice, be thinking about, that's important to you in the conversation.
All right, so just when I look over this in this matrix, I just look for what jumps out as areas that will provide opportunities for all students and expands the programs that we have now in our middle schools, and where we lack programs now where we can increase programs, and areas that provide more resources and offerings for personnel.
The thing that I see is that we see the infrastructure as being part of the main topic, and then we're seeing the opportunities, partnerships that can come out of it, and that is possibilities. That's things that we're going to be able to offer. But at the same time, it's like we are saying that we're going to be offering this, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they will happen right away. So yes, we are trying to design the best model, but just know that there will be some growing pains, there will be some trial and errors. Yes, we can try to foresee that this is the way we want to see it, but we all know that we can have the best lesson plan, come and try to, and it just flops. So yes, the community campus is by far the one that offers a lot of possibilities, but will they come to fruition? Who knows?
Be shocked at the past, it wouldn't you? So I think 2 things that I kind of noted were obviously from New Haven, so knowing that the east and west, it puts us out really far in regards to like remodeling our building. A couple of things I put too, when we talked about zoning and Nelson County in the future, we talked, TJ brought up 30-year eyes. That was something I noticed on community campus too. Even if we're looking at in 20 years, what buildings look like in 20 years, the fewer number of buildings I feel like we have, the more money we can put into, we can stay up to date versus New Haven's current situation where we're so far behind. The more buildings, I think, the more it is to keep up with. So those are a couple of things that stood out to me that not typically would. I like the community campus one just because I want more opportunities for my kids. I feel like New Haven gets left behind quite a bit. I just want more opportunities for my kids out there.
Well, thank you for doing this. This is exactly what I needed to start thinking. And from my perspective, the left-hand side of I have the template opened up. The left-hand is completely unappealing when we think about the students. Number one, in the efficiency of the school system. So then I go to the right hand of the page, and I was surprised a little bit. It was more of a toss-up than I thought initially about the East West Junior High plus the community campus. But I think if you really bore in the community campus wins, from my perspective, for the things we ought to be thinking about in this committee, which gives me the opportunity to say something I could say it the other night. I'm from a very small town in eastern Kentucky, and I am all about saving small communities. But it's not the job of the school board to save small communities. It's the job of the school board in this community, this committee, to come up with the best educational form and system for our children. It's up to our elected officials, state, county, city, whatever, to go to work on what we have to do to make our communities healthy. And from my own perspective, well, believe me, I want small communities. I came from a small community. Though you know me, I live out in the country and I love that lifestyle. But it's not the school board's job to save communities. It's the school board's job to give our children the best opportunity we can give them. And when I look at this, it starts to be pretty clear. So thank you for doing this matrix because it really calls out a lot of things.
Along the vein of what my neighbor here just said, I'm trying to find my note, the way I wrote it down. And essentially it is, we have a community that has a school. We're here to do what's best for the school, for the kids in that school region. And it appears to me it might be juxtaposed to what might be the best thing for the community. And I don't want to appear insensitive to the people in that community at all, because we are all one community. This is all about I Heart Nelson County, not I Heart Boston. And my thought process is that this group, we have to decide what is best for all the children. And that's the kids in Bloomfield, Cox Creek, everywhere. And I don't know that because if Plan the Community Campus, if that has a negative impact on the community of Bloomfield, it is not an intended consequence. But I don't think that that is what I'm here to do. I'm here to decide what would be the best thing for the children. And right now, I'm not telling you I know what that is, because I don't. We still have a lot of conversations. We have a lot of things to talk through. I mean, I would assume that you all have been doing research too about coming together, the pros and cons of school consolidations, advantages and disadvantages of various grade level organizations. There's all kinds of stuff out there that we can read to educate ourselves on that take the emotion out of it. So that's just what I would like to put out there.
Yeah, I think my biggest focus, and I love hearing the planning and zoning piece there too. Really looking at sustainability is one. I think to gain momentum, to build growth, to gain momentum, get growth, you have to have sustainable programs that are there. And also thinking about maximizing and optimizing, and that goes on with resources. It goes with students. It goes with leaders too. When you think about what environment would optimize, you put student A or student B in this environment, in that environment, in this environment. Which one really optimizes their gifts, which would allow a leader to really take what they have right now and then just run with it. And again, that sustainability piece as far as program building, you don't want to start something and have to continue to restart because the resources aren't there or you're not in optimal conditions. And so I know that, following the status quo, what we have right now is great, but I know that we can optimize and continue to build off of that. And so which of these environments best equips our kids and our leaders in the community for that? That's mainly what I'm looking at right now.
I noticed one of the things under the current middle school model is the highest staffing cost. So I'm questioning, is there a staffing study that predicts the outcomes of the staff and the staffing costs? And all the possibilities? Is it about saving money with staff or is it about kids? There's also the talk about increased course offerings, but it's my understanding that the LPC doesn't decide course offerings, that's an SBDM decision. So I would like to see potential course offerings for each model. I just feel like I need more data for the decision and projected models when we continue discussions.
Of course, the facility funding piece, rings out to me very much so, just because as Tiffany was talking about, the idea that New Haven would be pushed off to 2030 before any work was done, and it's been on the list for several decades already. Even the remodel of MCHS being pushed off to 2025 when we know that it has some severe needs in that school. When I look across the facility funding and even thinking through the sustainability of those buildings, it it just feasibly makes sense as we move across the page. The transportation is the other thing that always gets me, and I think it's a great representation of other resource issues we have. Transportation isn't an issue for Nelson County School District. Transportation is an issue for every school in the United States right now. There are not enough people who choose to be bus drivers, and that problem is not going to get better no matter how many incentives we offer, no matter how many benefits we get. It's going to be an issue, and it's going to continue to be an issue. So whatever model we utilize needs to take in those types of resource issues. It's where transportation is representative of one of those. It's another issue with teacher shortages across the United States in specialized skills. Well, if it's difficult to find a teacher in a specialized skill, but we can find one or two, but we can't find 6, by having the students together, we give all students the opportunity to benefit from those specialized teachers that there is not an excess of. So that is what I'm seeing. I will say also, there is some notes in here about what the ideal or the suggested savings would be for each of those models. That is in here as well. So.
Just kidding. One thing that popped out to me is that under the 4-school model is the only category that mentions academics. Opportunity does not necessarily mean academic success. I know of programs across the state, not just a Nelson County issue. I hear horror stories of kids not doing anything in these special opportunity classes because the teachers are too cramped to feel like doing it for whatever reason. My brother just took over a class in the school he's at. It was one of these special opportunity cooking classes. Just teach some basic cooking skills, which is scary that he's teaching that, but he found out that the previous teacher wasn't doing anything, and these kids are just getting a pass. Opportunities do not necessarily mean academic success. For example, Boston is the only school that scored higher on state testing academically. They're one of the schools that are struggling for opportunities. As something we need to keep in mind that opportunities do not necessarily equate to academic success. They can, but not structured properly, it can be an absolute disaster, and we spend a lot of money for nothing.
I think some of the things that stood out to me on the East-West model, kind of like Tiffany, I had a big concern about the delay in the remodel of CCS, New Haven, and ATC, just because those are the schools that, when they gave the building data as far as how long it's been since schools have been remodeled, those are the schools that have not been remodeled in the longest amount of time, so that was a big concern for me. On the community campus model, something I've been thinking a lot about is bus transfers, and then this model would offer fewer bus transfers. Currently, Cox's Creek is one of the biggest schools in our district for bus transfers, and to explain a little bit about what that looks like, high school students get on the bus around 3 o'clock, they come to Cox's Creek around 3:30. We wait for all the buses from the middle and high school to come in. They're not there until about 3:50, and that means that a lot of kiddos probably aren't getting home until around 4:30. So you have your high school kids that are getting on the bus at 3 and getting off the bus at 4:30. And I know we've thought about how long kiddos are on the bus. Right now, the way we're transferring kiddos are too long. So I'm excited that we're thinking about a way to do that differently for our kids. I didn't know what the shift in the bus garage was in the community campus.
So I think the shift in the bus drivers and some of those other pieces really are board decisions. So all of these are really, at the end of the day, we're putting a plan together. What that message is if a middle school redesign is a priority, for example, you were to build a West Nelson Middle, you wouldn't have enough money to do that and the other things. Just based on what we can see, a very, I would say, basic middle school would start at $30 million. And I think it's important that we know that that's a basic middle school. I would also say that at this point in time, knowing what we know, it would be, to me, an example of duplicating services. And I think the other, all those things, anything in here about timing would be a board decision based on the timing and context. So in theory, the plan, whatever plans on the DFP, the 5 board members would determine which of those within priority 1 would move first. And that's all just some things to remember as we think about that. Additionally, just the only comment I have is it's good to hear different diverse perspectives around the room. I think tonight and in the next meeting we'll continue to find ways to have that.
I didn't know if Eric wanted to say anything, because we just.
No, I was going to add. He's in line. You want to go first?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Well, just looking at all this information, man, it's been quite overwhelming for me. I've heard a lot of different perspectives. A lot of them seem to lean towards the community campus. Just being an average tax-paying guy, in my opinion, I think that we should the LPC should maybe have not been reformed. I'm not sure that we shouldn't have continued with the contingency plan of doing some work in New Haven, because I'm looking at it from a fiscal standpoint. I know that we're talking about closing down a brick and mortar school that's in good condition according to the architect. It's built in 1995. I'm not even sure what the cost was to build that thing, but you're talking about millions of dollars you're just going to abandon. I think that there's some alternatives we've been presented before. I think that the LPC should be the ones to come up with the ideas to brainstorm on. I think this process is going really fast. I would like to see it be more little drawn out, and more thoughtful process brought into it. I just can't see it. It seems like the data points that's been flushed into me is that we're spending money to save money. And to me, that just doesn't quite make sense. That's one part of it. The other part is we may be having some capacity issues here. Obviously, New Haven needs some updates. I think there's going to be potential for residential growth in New Haven and also Bloomfield. And to kind of push back on the idea that the schools are not here for the communities, I kind of disagree with that, because every person in this county is a taxpayer, and they all deserve the same opportunities in their local communities as they do in the county seat. I think that with these models, there's also going to be transportation challenges, just like there is with what we got now. And I'm hoping that we can come together as a committee and find some kind of middle ground. But if it was up to me, I would stick with the original DFP and not pick up another LPC for 2 more years and go on and rehabilitate New Haven.
So, just briefly, just to pick up a little bit on what you said on the LPC, and Mr. Ward, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. By law, the board must convene an LPC every 4 years. And that was put in place because districts continue to ignore their facilities. And so the state had to step in and say, you must look at your facilities every 4 years. Because districts don't have the money to do that all the time. And so they were using it for salaries and they were using it for general funds. And the state said, no, you can't do that, you need to put it in your buildings. So it required us to meet every 4 years to evaluate these facilities. Yes, Nelson County has done a fantastic job keeping their facilities up, but we are so far behind in everything else. And I ask, we can meet whenever we feel the need. As an LPC, by law, we don't have to wait 4 years. We come together as a board to decide what our county needs. And that doesn't mean in facilities, that means looking at our students. And yes, it's about money. Every dollar that our taxpayers give these schools needs to be trickled down to our students. Not in buildings, not in facilities that are decaying, but to our students. And if any of these were to do that, then it is the job of this LPC to do it. Nothing more than that. Where does the money go more to the students in our county than anywhere else? That is our job. And I agree with Mr. McCoy. It is not the school board's decision or the job of the school board to decide whether a town is going to survive. I'm sorry, it's not. It is whether our students can come back to those towns and make them survive. That is what we're here to decide. What can we give our students? So like Ms. Crow said, what are we going to offer our students in education that makes them want to come back here? So when they look back and say, oh, my school did this for me, and I'm going to go back there and serve it. The teacher shortages. Where do you think these teachers are going to go? They're not going to come back here? Why would they? If we continue to, there's this teacher shortage thing, that's not nothing new, and I can promise you, it is here to stay. That's not going anywhere. It's only going to get worse, and it's not pandemic related. It is everything related. It is the world we live in. So look at what is best for the students of this county as a whole, not as a community, not as a single source, but as every student in this county. That is our job.
You mentioned that LPC joined in 2 years ago, and Mr. Bradley, you may have addressed this in the first meeting, and I'll be perfectly honest, when we started doing the state requirements, I went into zombie mode and probably missed it. But it says on page 22 in the handbook, and it goes on to 23, if the board of education requests an amendment to the DFC between planning cycles, the LPC shall be reactivated, so the previous LPC should, and I'm just curious on why we reformed a new one.
Yeah, we reformed a new one because the original LPC was formed in 2019.
Okay.
To be frank, the people on the committee fell into one of a few categories. One, they were no longer willing to serve. Two, they were no longer in the district. Or three, they didn't meet the criteria of the nomination process. Based on that, we discussed with the Kentucky Department of Education, and the Kentucky Department of Education said that you should base this on your own legal guidance and determine if you should reseat the LPC. And naturally, we reset the LPC because it was the smartest thing we could do. And I would also say this particular conversation, just to be clear, does not relate to the purpose of why we're here. I think we need to be cautious in continuing to throw red herrings out over the coming weeks as we look at why we're here and the purpose of this committee. Because we as a community of people are represented on here by 20 people. I'm a non-voting member. But the reality is we went through the process to reseat the LPC. The LPC has been set. KDE has approved it. Nelson County Board of Education has approved it. We have a job to do. And that's why we're here.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to remind everyone, these videos are there to play for the public. Some of you were there. These 5 people volunteered their time. The video on the left is better, I'd say, quality. The video on the right, it's not as bad as I thought it was. I listened to it, you can hear the people talking. There's a few little, echoes that occur. But these 5 people work in 5 very different places. And I think they'll give you some awareness of benefits and challenges. We asked them all about challenges that have been faced in these models, and they just shared some of those challenges. And there are things that really I never thought of. And there are things too that they say, those are the things that we just have to uniquely navigate that emerges, but they're all small things in theory. We should have data because it's data from the last meeting. So really, at this point in time, it's really bad to go to the public forum or go back to look at the boards here. These are the boards from last time. We're really just going to go back and see if there's anything on these boards that were from that last meeting that allowed us to think this is something we can be thinking about for the next meeting and we still need more clarity on. That was really the last piece, is just going back to where we were, see if there's anything we're missing as we move to the next meeting.
You know, we were supposed to start the public forum at 6:30, and my watch has got us at 6:48 right now, which is another reason I wish we kind of had a facilitator that would help guide us through that process. You said we were probably going to get one, right?
I can talk a little bit on that. So, I have spoken with Mr. Tim Eaton, with, what is his, KSP? Yeah. He has agreed to come starting next week, and because the situation that we already have, that our agendas and our LPC process has been laid out in such a wonderful manner, he's basically going to just come and listen and charge about $500 a meeting. So he's going to give us a pretty good deal to do that. But basically, that starts next week. He has a funeral tonight, so he couldn't be here. And it will basically be determined meeting by meeting if we need him or not.
You know, and to this notion that you know we're you know we end up 10, 15 minutes behind when we get to doing our public forums. I would like to like the committee to reconsider maybe having these public forum meetings on a separate meeting night where we're going to have residents. I mean, I'm glad they're here participating. You can see all this transform, but you know, it'd be nice to have the public forum, I would think, to where we could discuss in the debrief exactly what was proposed at that portion of it. But you know, that's up to the committee itself.
I think it's important to have the public forums on the same night because I think it's important for all of the communities and the members that come out to be able to hear everything that's going on in the meeting.
Right.
To be able to speak about it
Right.
freshly, as it's freshly on their mind.
That makes sense. Then maybe
I would agree too.
That's-
Also, many administrators are on the board. We also have multiple things throughout the week, so trying to find
Sure.
an additional night.
Right.
Obviously are kind of religion for my kids, so we can take care of that, but
Yeah, that
we
makes
have ball games.
So what about for a compromise, we could split these meetings up, instead of having so many items on the agenda, we could split those up and then have different, extend the meetings out.
I don't personally feel like there is a lot on the agendas anymore. At the very first couple meetings, we had to cover so many different things.
That's what I'm talking about.
Personally feel, but we're process. So at this point of the agenda, I don't feel like there's too much on the agenda to be able to handle it.
But how do you know what's going to be on the next agenda? How do you know what we're going to discuss? It's on the slide. So, like, say we're talking about doing, maybe some contingencies, maybe some alternative options here. How do you push through that without, knowing that you're going to have another meeting, or what's going to require another meeting or not?
Well, I don't know if the options, we don't have a whole lot of change that we can go from here. We either keep it, there's not a whole lot of transition. And
For facilities, because it's specifically for facilities.
Okay,
So the original part was we were just going to look at the slide, the notes from last meeting, see if we saw anything before we enter
that's fine.
to the next meeting. So again, this is really to see if there's anything we see from the last time.
Can somebody that was, and I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings about the way you write, but can somebody read to me the Bloomfield slide? I'm not,
Why did you point to me, TJ? I apologize. I was trying to write as fast as I could.
maybe it's not my fault. No, it's not. Sorry, you want me to read all? Thank you, please, just real quick.
So equal opportunities for every child, investing in those opportunities in different areas of the county, using taxpayers' dollars most efficiently. Every community member has a voice, time to digest everything that's going on. For question number 2, earlier access to opportunities for elementary and middle. Maintaining connections to communities, real-life experiences. I think we were talking about finance classes. Explore every option. For number 3, educated, open to options, can clear, research-based decision, and willing to listen.
Okay, does anybody have any thoughts or anything about this?
Somebody want to talk about what the right hand picture?
I forgot, I added this picture. So the picture on the right is the newspaper this weekend. I think it's relevant. It's a relevant conversation that we should at least know that we can talk to the city of Bardstown, because Bardstown City Schools published in the paper this weekend their new version of their campus that they're looking to spend between, looks like $15 and $25 million that connects the middle school and the high school to the common media space. They have middle school on the top left, high school on the right, the common center room in the middle that connects that to their CTE programs. I share this only because I think they do also have a partner in this conversation. We think about the future of school design. That is just a coincidence.
I would also like to say, when you had asked if there was any other comments, one of the things that I noticed on all of the boards was everybody wanted to be able to have an open conversation. And I very much appreciate today's meeting, and that I feel like everybody really did get to share. This isn't, like, these aren't personal,
Right.
this isn't a personal thing, and I appreciate
No.
the conversation this time.
Absolutely, good point. Thank you for that. Yeah.
I just want to comment on the Bloomfield comment, because I know that can be like a sore subject. I'm a transplant. I'm from LA and live in E-Town, so I'm like really, I'm in Switzerland. But if you look at Bloomfield, I'm sorry. My wife is from Boston, so you guys got going for you. Anyway, if you look at Bloomfield's common board, can we put that up there? They all talk about all these great things that they want for their kids, but let's think about where that money comes from. The money comes from how many students can you support at that school, and that's how many teachers you're able to keep at that building. If we want all those things for our kids at Bloomfield, I just don't see how like the current model can support that. Like, and if we are, then transportation, like how we're gonna get them. So for instance, correct me if I'm wrong, OKH, where's OKH? Oh, FFA, yes. First time ever?
Yes.
You have access to FFA program? What about Bloomfield?
Yeah, it's our second year with it.
Second year with it? Great, see, I didn't even know that. Okay.
And our site-based agree to every one of these things. It's not that the site-based doesn't want to, but when you're allocated 5 teachers for the number of kids you have, it's very limited on what you can make happen, especially in K-8 school, which I think we forget about a lot of times too, is we talk about 6 through 12 being on the same campus. Bloomfield and Boston, or excuse me, New Haven and Boston have had kindergarten through 8th grade in the same building for years and years and years. We don't have barriers. We don't have extra, buildings for those things, but we manage because we build a culture that supports each other in that. We use that to our advantage. We have 8th grade kids who may mentor younger kids who are teacher assistants. But also giving us a new building does not create opportunity and access to specialized programs. We want a new building, don't get us wrong. We want all the new things. but it doesn't get rid of those barriers, which is, as a parent, and Jesse can vouch too, we want these opportunities. I want my kid on the academic team. We don't have enough kids. We don't have a teacher that has the skills or the time because they're teaching 2 and 3 electives in 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade math. We don't have algebra because we have 1 or 2 kids that may qualify for algebra or want algebra, but that's not fair to that 1 or 2 kids. So again, facilities thinking the model that we're currently in, just renovating, doesn't get us to what every single person listed on that, as far as opportunities and access to academic, athletic, any of those things. This is our first year having a basketball team in a really long time. We can't, and sustaining that. So we have things, we had programs last year that our kids loved, that we don't get to have this year, and they come to us like, why can't we have this? We want this back, because we can't sustain them year after year. It's not that we don't want to.
So everything that comes back to those sounding boards, it all becomes about access to those programs. And ultimately, how are we going to accomplish as an LPC? What is the best way that we can provide that for everyone? Not just, okay, not just Louisville, Boston, everyone. Like what would be the best setup?
And that's on every board.
Yeah, that's what I just looked at.
And I just want to clarify something, because we were talking, when it comes back to the things that the communities like junior school. All of our communities are keeping their grade schools. This is not going to change that plan. So we're still going to have a community school if this is our decision, correct? I just want to clarify that.
At the present time, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, only school boards can close buildings.
Right.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you still have, I mean, despite closing the school or despite this whole saving the town thing, I mean, it's more about saving the school, I think, is what, the Bloomfield is probably thinking about, but,
It should be about saving the students.
Exactly.
I mean, it is. I mean,
At the
it
risk
is.
of
Well,
somebody else
let me
losing
just
something.
tell you just a real brief history of me moving to Bloomfield. That school over there was one of the reasons that we decided to come over there, because the people in that community were so involved with the school. To me, it was just a wonderful place where people were so involved with the school, and it was like something I hadn't experienced before myself. So I understand what the community in that area thinks about, but really looking past that, think about the school. How much, as a taxpayer, think about that school. Think about how much money that thing costs, and think about abandoning it.
But that's not the LP's decision.
Not our decision to do right now.
I don't think you can separate the two. I mean, that's
You
just me.
have to. The LPC's job is not to decide what happens to that
It's not a
building.
political decision, it's the best for our kids.
Political, I mean, it's a financial decision.
For long term.
Like, right now, we have the money to do what's on the old,
Doesn't give my kids opportunity and access. You can change my building all you want, it's not gonna give us that access.
well, I mean, that's something that could probably be worked on, you know what I mean? I mean, we
How do
can
you increase staff when that funding doesn't change? You cannot physically increase staff, you cannot increase the number of teachers in my building because the money is 2 separate pots. We've addressed this over and over and over.
Well, this is
You
the
cannot
first,
do
this
that.
is my 3rd meeting, right? This is my 3rd meeting. I know that maybe these conversations have been on for a while, but
We went over it the first 2
We
meetings.
talked about that in the first 2 meetings, that you can't pick one from the other.
It's the state
It's
requirement, federal
frustrating.
funding.
It's very frustrating.
Schools deal with it on an everyday
But-
basis, yes, absolutely.
I mean, it just seems unreal to me that, that it's been, the current model has been going on for so long. And I mean, we talk about limited access and, has it always been a problem?
Yes, education's changed though. What our children, like what children 20 years ago, what our parents expected us to be able to provide to children 20 years ago, very different than what we know we can now provide. Back then, people didn't think about providing these things, but now we have opportunities to provide our kids things that we could have never even dreamed of. But we can only do that by being able to stretch every dollar we have as far as we can possibly go. So, but to the point, because we've always been this way, the growth and the access that anybody has just to intelligence has gone tenfold in the last 2 decades. So we can't have schools the same way we did 20 years ago, even though it works then, because it's not providing our students what they need to excel in the world that we currently live in.
I can remember when we closed New Old School at St. Vincent de Paul. One of the worst decisions we ever thought we made. Best thing ever happened to Kevin Maynard. I went to New Haven Public, got great education. Didn't have all the opportunity to do. But today, my son went to New Haven. He got to play basketball. Terrible basketball player. I didn't know there was opportunities to run across country. He worked his rear end off for 4 years and always progressed for 4 years. What could he have been if he had been in one of these other middle schools? That's just what I'm saying. Give every kid in this county a chance.
So we were just going to look at the calendar, and we will leave the images up there. So this is a revised calendar, and I believe the New Haven school was already on the previous calendar. The only addition to this is the Nelson County High School. There are agenda items on there, and I'll be clear, in our conversations over the past 2 years, from our 2019 LPC process and talking to others around the state, it is natural to begin looking at example facility plans in the next meeting, in the next 2 meetings, so that we can pick apart the details, because the facility plan is very complex. That particular document looks different than any of the documents that we've looked at since the introduction to the last 2019 DFP. So this is basically just a generic overview of what those 2 meetings would consist of. There is a public forum in New Haven that has already been publicized. I will also say this. This LPC will have to have one more public forum beyond any of these meetings. Because once a DFP is sent to the Kentucky Department of Education, it's sent back to the LPC. Then the LPC can determine what to do with the feedback. Then it either goes back to KDE again, or it goes to the local board, depending on what the feedback is. I share that, that back and forth in and of itself is a process. You send it, they send it back, you don't have to do anything with it at that point, but it's part of the process. This is a context. So basically, these would be the next 2. At Nelson County High School, I think because of it being at least in the current conversation, a major priority, looking at that school and examples of that school and how it would potentially be designed will be an important part of this conversation. Knowing that in every model, Nelson County High School is in the conversation. So that was the basic reasoning for that.
Just a quick question. Is there any way, if we do have more meetings, we could have one at Bloomfield Middle? Because in this whole 6-month conversation, there's never been anything at Bloomfield Middle School specifically.
Yeah, we've been at Winfield Middle.
We've been to elementary the last 2 times.
Been elementary, never to showcase our students, to showcase our building, to hear our voices.
So I'm just gonna speak from the perspective of the board. We've been in the middle school, Bloomfield Elementary School, twice this last month. This is our first meeting in Boston, New Haven, Nelson County. There are 12 schools, if you will, 12 school buildings. I think the LPC just have to determine how we continue to access communities across the county.
And I don't take this as mean, because I'm not meaning it to be. But we have to look at we have to remember, we're talking about Nelson County here. I understand that it looks like the sites are on Bloomfield. I get that and I empathize with you guys, I do. But we have to keep our vision on all the students in Nelson County.
So not going to Bloomfield means we keep our vision on everybody?
I think going to Bloomfield,
But we've been to Bloomfield. We were at Bloomfield during the community meetings. We were at Bloomfield for, I think, 2 board meetings. We've been at Bloomfield in the last 6 months. I mean, I've only been on this board since January, and I've been to Bloomfield quite a bit, probably more than I've been there for Archer Tournament.
So you want us to vote on these next 2 meetings?
Just the Nelson County aspect. We've already got the new from last meeting set, it's just a reminder. We can assume, so it's pretty safe to assume we do not meet the following Wednesday, it's the day before Thanksgiving.
we just need a motion.
Are you guys comfortable with that? I mean, we're talking about voting on the draft of the DFP already.
I'm comfortable, do we just need a motion to add that one?
We're adding 17, correct? Yes.
And we're just voting on dates, not agenda items.
We're just voting on the date of the meeting.
Well, one of the agenda items is to vote on the
That's
draft of
that's-
the DFP, right?
Potentially, so that's not a need that we would.
I mean, we can ask for more meetings on the 17th, can't we?
Yeah, but you know we're not going to do that.
I make a motion to add November 17th, the 5:30 meeting.
Second.
Add Martina.
Motion made, there's a motion
Made by Amy Owens and seconded by Martini of having
the meeting on the 17th. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. The motion carries. Okay, before we start into the public forum, I guess we have to adjourn this meeting. So I need a motion to adjourn, to go into the public forum.
I'll make a motion.
Motion made by Tiffany Carter.
Candace.
Second by Candace Bryant. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we're going to open up the public forum. Thank you for attending local planning committee public forum. Guest comments, time for celebration and feedback regarding the important work occurring across our schools. I've got 3 members here that have signed up to speak. If there's anyone else that would like to speak, we ask that you keep the comments under, around 3 minutes or so. And we'll give you grace time there. But, the first person that is up to speak is Susan Rogers.
Kentucky Program Review and Investigations Committee, Research Report Number 334 by Greg Hager, PhD, titled, School Size and Student Outcomes in Kentucky Public Schools. Researchers link greater student extracurricular participation to smaller schools. Research explained the position that although large schools typically offer greater diversity of activities compared to small schools, the competition for the same opportunities is greater in larger institutions. The conditions in smaller schools appears particularly conducive to positive student attitudes and morale due to opportunities for active participation. Researchers observed that the highest math scores were found in schools that enroll between 600 and 900 students. The authors found that while learning declined somewhat, moving students from small schools, 200 students, to medium, 400 to 600 students, it deteriorated significantly in schools enrolling more than 800 students. Poor students scored considerably worse in large schools enrolling more than 1,200 students. Numerous studies report higher incidences of student misconduct in large high schools. Researchers found that school size influences dropout rates indirectly, which grows less favorable with size. They calculated that increasing 400 students leads to 1% rise in dropout rates. Research investigating the effects of school size favors smaller schools for positive non-academic outcomes such as increased student participation, higher attendance rate, less student misconduct, and greater parental interest and involvement. I know this is about planning of facilities, but I do hope you all think about how this will affect all students. Students with anxiety, students with physical limitations, students in education, in special education. How will these students receive more opportunities? Real, concrete facts that show this population of students will also receive said opportunities from the merging of middle schools to the high school setting. Instead of being in a school with 450 students, they will be among 1,200 or more. Is this best practice? Since the decision of this committee will change Nelson County education for years to come, I am asking you, the LPC, to send out a parent survey that will ask the parents or guardians of Nelson County students what they think would be best to suit their child in our county schools. I am also asking Chairman Shelburne to schedule the public hearing meeting to take place at the school that is slated to be closed with this merger, Bloomfield Middle School. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Next up to speak would be Deborah Wojcicki.
Good evening, everyone. I do realize that it's not the responsibility to save our local communities. However, it's not the responsibility to destroy them either. New Haven and Bloomfield seem to be the only areas that are planning and zoning community chairperson described as having growth potential, yet those are both areas that you are potentially planning to close schools. New Haven is working on getting a new sewer line put in, so they will have the infrastructure to support the anticipated growth from all of the jobs that are added in that area. Yet, once again, they're trying to pull one of their schools. I think it's greatly come to light that we shouldn't be worrying about adding opportunities. We need to be focusing on academics. Some of these scores, it's not going to make our students employable in anything but I shouldn't even say manufacturing jobs. Low-skilled labor jobs. Is that what we really want our students to have? We talk about engineering programs and whatnot, yet what's the percentage of kids from our county that can even qualify for such a job? It's not that many. That's one of the reasons why we don't have those types of opportunities once they graduate to come back. We don't even have the workforce base to support that type of job. And looking at these numbers, we're not going to have those types of people to fill that workforce. Especially when we move to a larger school where more and more kids are going to be pushed behind and forgotten. It's kind of like the same thing with the sports. Oh, great, we're going to have these sports teams that we've never had before. But basically what you're going to have is 2 varsity teams at the middle school level, because you're going to have such a small number of students that's going to make the team. It's actually going to be less opportunities. And we can't be worried about our sports when we look at these grades. My goodness, we got to focus on the basics. Every day I hear about kids who are in senior high and they can't even write a complete sentence. And it makes it kind of difficult when we have acronyms everywhere that make no sense. I mean, I have to sit here and figure out, what is this supposed to mean? I understand that N stands for Nelson County, but I mean, the announcement that came from Bloomfield yesterday, that needed to be returned today. It makes no sense. Sorry, I'm out of time. I have more to say, but please don't forget about Bloomfield for that last meeting. It seems like you guys are afraid to come there for some reason when they have the most to lose. So, thank you, and I appreciate all of you volunteering your time to be here.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you.
Pam Doctor is up to speak.
Hello. How are you all? My name is Pam. I'm a lifelong resident of Nelson County. I went to Kentucky Home. I went to New Haven. I graduated in Nelson County in '85. I have 3 children, and they started their education in 1992 in our old school building that is now a business and thriving. When my oldest started at Boston Elementary, she got out at 5th grade, he got out at 5th grade. They had the opportunity, when they went to Kentucky Home, of diversity. Then they went to Nelson County High School. Unfortunately, my youngest, who goes here in 6th grade, has been here since kindergarten. She may not get that opportunity. And being engaged as a parent, not just an alumni, I'm a former PTA member. I've got time invested in planning for the Boston Oyster Supper as well as other community events. This has established a strong sense of Nelson County pride in me and my family. As a former bus driver for Nelson County and a bus driver trainer, I also was a classroom aide and have volunteered for this school district throughout my children's educational journey. I see the K-8 model here in Boston as limiting the opportunities and access of my child. OKH has more than tripled the elective choices as we do here in Boston. This is a problem. My 2 oldest children were connected to a more diverse population starting in middle school and being with the same students and families who we have come to love as our own. Audrina, my youngest, will struggle in the transition to high school. I challenge you as the local planning committee to focus your time and attention to increased opportunities and access for all Nelson County students. The noise of social media is making a mockery of the work being dedicated to the future for our children. This isn't political, and it's not a joke. This is doing what's right for Nelson County, for our children, for our kids that you go watch play ball, for the ones that you stand in the stand and hear play. It's not about sports, and believe me, I could stand up here and tell you about some sports. But anyway, it's about doing what's right for our kids. It's not a building. It's not a community. It's my kids' future. And I appreciate every bit of your all's time. And I appreciate your dedication to Nelson County Schools.
Thank you for that, Pam. We have one more speaker that would like to speak. With Jessica Ballard.
Good evening. So I just had a few things that I wanted to ask you all about with suggestions as things that you all might want to look at and request. So the first thing that I wanted to mention is, I believe Tracy Ms. Bowling, you talked about the last LPC at the last meeting about how it was put together just because you had to put it together, and you took 3 months to put something together when you were not wanting to close down a building and build another building. It cost millions of dollars. And now you're going to expedite one where major decisions are needed and are being requested. I think that's a little much to be expediting that without having the time to really thoroughly investigate. By thoroughly investigating, I would like to see that you all would ask to have the programs modeled out. have each 4 options, current and all the other options, put out the student numbers, teacher numbers, what the student ratio, find out currently what school-sponsored clubs are at every single school, not just the ones that we're looking at, not just middle school. I'm going to tell you the high school opportunities that were shown today, those are even limited for our high school students. They have to apply to be part of those programs. So having to apply to that program in high school, your middle schoolers are not going to have that opportunity. That's going to go to the high schoolers. So you really need to look at what opportunities exist in middle schools. And you need to compare that, find out what are the real opportunities. When you look at electives, which ones are actually put together and organized? Because there are some in some of the schools, and not any of my daughters, I just know of a few other students in different schools, where they talk about their elective being an easy class. Oh, I just go in there and watch TV. So you need to really look at which electives are structured and actually going to provide that education. If you are not willing to look at all of that in detail for every single suggestion, then you're not doing due diligence in my opinion. And that's my opinion. So what I would envision would have current state, a list of all schools across the front, and then it would have all your statistics, clubs, sports, student participation, which clubs have leadership opportunities, presidents, secretaries, etc. And then what will that look like when you combine schools? What will it look like in all of the different suggestions? That's what I would like you all to look at, because I think that will paint a picture and show a better view of what is going to be most beneficial to the kids. Can I say one more thing, please?
Please.
Okay. So I have talked to at many of the board meetings. I've gotten emotional at some, but I will tell you that if you show that this is the right thing for all of our communities, all of our students, it's not just because it's easier to manage because it's in closer proximity to central office. It needs to be right for the community, it needs to be right for the students, because as you all say, people, place, and purpose. The place is Nelson County, not Bardstown.
Thank you for that, Jessica. I don't have much on anything after that. We should be.
Do you want to do debrief?
I think we should.
Do y'all want to do a quick debrief like we did last week? Or,
We just can't break into small groups.
yeah, I'm going to have to do it as a large group.
Yeah, I think it's better than this.
Yeah.
So at this portion of the meeting, we talked about what everybody just got spoken about, and I think it deserves some attention and respect at each one. I appreciate you all coming out and talking, so I'll just open it up for discussion if anybody has anything to say about what the public forum discussed tonight. Appreciate your input.
Is there any reason why a parent survey hasn't been sent out? I know we've had public forums, but we have the one call system, we have chin mail. Just shoot something out simple to parents, ask them for input, just so it's transparent.
I don't know what the answer to this, but I do think that based on, and I've talked to Mr. Shelburne, actually, he asked me specifically about our community. We do struggle a little bit with involvement. We have the same parents who show up a lot. Just as an example, and I shall share this with Mr. Shelburne as well. For SBDM, we had maybe 9 parents vote. For the LPC, I think we might have had 12. And maybe I was wrong. Maybe I got those numbers split back and forth. But I don't know that a survey would give a clear picture as to what all of our families would want. Again, that's my perception, obviously.
Well, and I think too, a lot of the information that we're talking about here in LPC, we don't have a gym full of parents looking at the data as we're looking at it, or hearing the information as we're hearing it. So if we just send a survey out without that content, I'm not sure, or contact, I don't know if you would get the results that you think you're gonna get.
Well, I mean, I've said this before, and I'm going to reiterate it, that I think such a major decision like this deserves the attention and the input of you know, every resident that wishes to put it in there. I feel like it's such a huge decision for a body of 20 to make. I think it would be a good idea to have a parent survey, you know, and, you know, you could debate who's going to put in, who's not going to put in, but at least people feel like they got to be able to express their voice.
Statistically speaking, if we have low participation, we can just like toss it out.
I think different communities would have higher rates of participation, so you'd almost have to take that data and skew it down based on participation, because obviously you're gonna have that from building to building, just based on
If we
current
keep
structures.
track of participation, then we can look at that survey and say, okay, does this really reflect New Haven, or was it just 5 parents that responded? You know, and you know, each community can break that down. No harm in sending one out, as long as we keep track of the data properly. If we just do district-wide and not keep track of where it's going from, then we might have everybody from Bloomfield, you know, complete the survey and skew the numbers. So definitely, I agree if you break it down by community. I don't see.
I mean, as a resident myself, I think it would be appreciated if somebody was going to spend money. We're talking about, you know, for our kids, we're going to hang a pretty good price tag on them in the future, so.
This regards to, since April when the Connected Community Campus, the Connected Campus came out, there's been a form on there for parents that was also released since April. That form has been on that website. I know it's been released through social media, through the schools as well. There was a lot of the entire Connected Campus conversations that happened from April, March, May, to get feedback to also cover this LPC process.
What was that on?
So that was on the Connected Campus, the Community Campus site that came out through Nelson County Schools. It was linked on there and it was brought up at each community meeting as well.
We've also been to city council meetings. Mr. Bradley and I went to New Haven City Council meetings to meet with a whole different population. I've had specific LPC meetings in my building around the process, what the future looks like for New Haven. We had 7 families come to that. We had 1 person at the city council meeting that we went to. So I do think we're also doing due diligence. I think that is a partial, like we're putting in time and effort to these things, and people want their opinions voiced. We've given them ample opportunities to do so.
I think that's a good part of the process.
Without information that we are privileged to, if you rely only on social media, you rely only on what so-and-so told me, you're not going to necessarily always get accurate information. So in the absence of our conversation, which is also open to public, a survey may not be the best way to get good, reflective, honest feedback.
Honestly, it's on a bumper sticker right here. It's got 4 options on it. It's pretty.
If I remember correctly, because I'm not a huge fan of surveys, and our reason is because the way surveys are done, it eliminates the controls that you need to actually be able to use the data. So when we just send it out as a big mass mailing, the data won't actually be anything that actually means anything. It's just the opinion of the few people, and we have no control information to see if there's a reason that somebody feels a certain way. That being said, if we're debriefing, I would really like to thank some of the conversations that I heard at the microphone. There were specific things that people are concerned about, and they're hoping that we're going to address. There was concerns with how special education students are going to get access. There was concerns about ensuring that our middle school students have more access to programs and that they're not going to be pushed under the rug because now they're having to compete against high school students. And all of those things are things that I feel like we continue to have conversations about to make sure that as we move forward, whatever decision is made addresses those things as well. So I just would, as a debrief to that, I would like to thank the speakers who brought those things forward so that those can always be on our mind as well.
I think one of the things I would want clarification on is the size of the schools. I've heard it referenced multiple times that this school, whether it's a community campus or whatever we want to call it, that the proposal is 1,200 students or 1,400 students. And that is not accurate. You're talking about a middle school and a high school. Those numbers are two different numbers. We can combine them all day we want, but that doesn't mean the students are all going to be in the same building. 750 high school students, is that right, roughly? And
A little over 720 and 750.
so it's still two different schools. They just have the opportunity to move from one location to another if they want to.
We'll take care of you.
So, I will, I'll just add to that, just about school size. Unfortunately for me, my master's thesis was written on the school size. And the cohort size is the primary conversation piece. So cohort size is the number of kids in grade level. And the ideal cohort size is where you are able to offer programs and opportunities that are sustainable and enduring while also knowing the people within that grade level. And that's why that 150 to 200 range is kind of the ideal model. And it's personalized, people still know each other, as opposed to, and I think the guest comment mentioned this, graduation rates. And this is one of the reasons that Nelson County High School split in 2009, 2010. At that time, graduation rates, four-year graduation rates were closer to 85 to 87%. Over the next 10 years, those graduation rates increased over 10%, which is approximately 30 students annually or more that were graduating that were not graduating prior to that. At the same time, there is not a direct, obvious correlation between, while the research may say there's a correlation between school size and graduation rate, you could have a school with a cohort of 600 and a high graduation rate. I think it's a highly effective, well-run school. But those are just some, that's a local reality, just to know about cohort size.
Yeah, there's one thing that I heard tonight that I just want to clarify. I mean, there was talk that New Haven School was shutting down. I've never heard that. Where is that coming from? So I'd like to know, who thinks New Haven School was shut down? Everything that has been processed to us, and processed and given to us is about making New Haven and Boston greater or equal to Bloomfield and Oklahoma. So I don't know, these things are going around to the public, and y'all want to do a forum. Most of these people are believing stuff on social media. You know, there's signs in New Haven about to save our schools. I mean, I just don't understand it.
It's a good discussion. I thought that the young lady Jessica at the end that spoke about, looking at the electives and looking at what that represents in each model would be an important thing for the committee to kind of to look at, to get more of a detailed exactly what's going to be offered, what can be offered now on each one of those models is something that should definitely be thought about and definitely looked into. But whenever we want to decide to talk about that, All right. Anybody got anything to add?
No, I want to say, I don't know who said it, academics. That is a big, important task. The teachers have to deal with it. We come every day prepared, try to deliver the best lessons that we can. Standard testing, it is what it is. You can call them bias questions, you can call them whatever you want. Teaching does happen in this district. I know it happens at my school. I know it happens in my classroom. A test does not really determine what went on. One test, a kid could have any issue, could not have slept that day, did not eat that day, broke up with a girlfriend, boyfriend that day. So testing, take it for what it is. Yes, it's necessary to enter colleges, but if you look around now, some colleges are doing away with that altogether. So yes, I think that academics is important, and I actually spoke with Mr. Bradley today because he came visit us at the high school, and I told him that that was one of my main concerns, was to provide high quality education, and I don't want us to be in the newspapers. You guys see that all the time. And nothing against middle schools, but your name never goes out there. It's the high school scores that get splattered all over social media and newspapers. So academics is important, and I want to say that we are trying.
And I appreciate everything that you all do. I really do. I really do. It's a tough job too. Hey, would you care to announce the next meeting?
Any more questions? Oh, we did that on the last.
It was the previous meeting.
Yep, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second by Kevin. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.